The saccharine sweetness of graduation clung to the air, a cloying scent of forced celebration that grated on Qinghui's raw nerves. Dressed in her old, ill-fitting school uniform, a stark contrast to the vibrant dresses and celebratory suits around her, she felt like a ghost haunting her own past. For years stolen, locked away, branded a criminal. And for what? For a crime her own sister committed. Her fingers tightened around the worn fabric of her blazer, the only tangible remnant of a life unjustly interrupted. The opulent Lin family mansion, normally a place of comfort, now felt like a gilded cage. Laughter, brittle and shallow, echoed around her. Every glance, every whispered word, seemed to sear her skin, a constant reminder of her isolation. She saw her mother, draped in expensive silk, her face a mask of strained pleasantries. The relief Qinghui had foolishly anticipated, the maternal embrace she had yearned for during those endless prison nights, was nowhere to be found. Instead, Mrs. Lin's eyes flickered with an unsettling mix of pity and disappointment. Qinghui. Lin Yanshu, her brother, approached, his voice laced with a careful neutrality. His gaze flitted over her uniform, lingering for a fraction of a second too long. He offered a tight smile, a gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. You shouldn't have come. A bitter taste rose in her throat. Shouldn't have come. To her own sister's graduation. To the celebration of a life built on her stolen future. Why? She asked, her voice raspy from disuse. The word caught in the celebratory air, a discordant note in a carefully orchestrated symphony. It's complicated, Yanshu murmured, glancing nervously around. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the picture of discomfort. Complicated. That was one word for it. Qinghui's internal monologue was a whirlwind of cynicism. Complicated like a meticulously woven web of lies and deceit. Before she could press further, a shrill voice cut through the air. Look who decided to grace us with her presence. The prodigal daughter returns. Lin Wanwan, the star of the evening, stood at the top of the grand staircase, radiating a smug satisfaction that made Qinghui's stomach churn. She descended, each step measured, each movement calculated to maximize her impact. The crowd parted for her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. Qinghui felt a cold dread seep into her bones. This was not a welcome, it was a public execution. Do you still think you are the eldest daughter of the Lin family? Wanwan's voice dripped with venom. You're just a fake that no one wants. Her words, laced with a triumphant cruelty, struck Qinghui like a physical blow. The whispers around them intensified, feeding on the drama unfolding before them. Qinghui's breath hitched. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to tear down the facade of normalcy that Wanwan had so carefully constructed. But the years of confinement had taught her a different kind of strength, a chilling stillness that masked the turmoil within. How dare you show your face here? Another voice, sharp and accusatory, sliced through the gathering. Fu Shiye. His eyes, burning with a cold fury, locked onto hers. How dare you push my sister down the stairs? The accusation hung in the air, thick with unspoken judgment. Qinghui's mind raced. The stairs. The fall. The blurry memories of that night, fragmented and distorted by trauma and the relentless interrogation that followed. She hadn't pushed anyone. She knew it with every fiber of her being. But her denials had been met with disbelief then, and they would be met with disbelief now. I didn't, she stated, her voice low but firm. The words felt heavy, weighted with the years of injustice. The denial seemed to ignite Fu Shiye's rage. He took a step closer, his fists clenched. The air crackled with tension. Don't lie, he roared, his voice echoing through the grand hall. Everyone knows what you did. The crowd murmured in agreement, their faces a sea of condemnation. Qinghui felt a wave of nausea wash over her. This was it. The moment she had dreaded. The public shaming, the relentless persecution. She closed her eyes for a moment, steeling herself against the onslaught. She was alone. Utterly and completely alone. The party dissolved into a blur of accusations and denials. Qinghui's head throbbed, the cacophony of voices a deafening roar. She stumbled back, her body trembling with exhaustion. Suddenly, the world tilted, the vibrant colors of the party swirling into a dizzying vortex. Then, darkness. She awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. A hospital room. White walls, blindingly bright. Her mother sat beside the bed, her face etched with worry. But beneath the concern, Qinghui detected a flicker of something else. Guilt. Fear. Qinghui, Mrs. Lin whispered, her voice laced with a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. You're awake. Qinghui's throat was dry, her voice a mere croak. What happened? You fainted, her mother replied, her gaze avoiding Qinghui's. The doctor said it was stress. Stress. That was one way to put it. Qinghui closed her eyes, the memories of the party flooding back, each one a sharp, stinging blow. She felt a deep, bone-weary exhaustion settle over her. The door opened, and Lin Yenshu entered, his face pale. He rushed to her bedside, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Fear. Guilt. It was the same look she had seen in their mother's eyes. Qinghui, he began, his voice trembling slightly. There's something you need to know. He hesitated, as if wrestling with some internal struggle. Then, in a rush of words, he confessed. He revealed Wanwan's manipulation, their mother's complicity, the elaborate web of lies they had spun to protect the golden child. He confessed his own role in the cover-up, his guilt and fear having finally broken through the wall of denial. The truth, raw and brutal, hung in the air, thick with unspoken regret. Qinghui stared at her brother, her mind reeling. It was true. All of it. The whispers, the doubts, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It had all been true. A sob escaped her lips, a raw, guttural sound of pain and betrayal. The years of suppressed grief, the weight of injustice, finally broke through the carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart. And in that moment, something shifted. The anger, the resentment, the weariness, began to give way to a steely resolve. She would have justice. She would reclaim her life. And she would never let them forget what they had done. The cacophony of the graduation party, a jarring mix of laughter and clinking glasses, pressed against Lin Qinghui like a physical force. She stood just outside the brightly lit venue, the cool night air a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere within. For years stolen, replaced by the cold, sterile walls of a prison cell. Now, released, she felt more caged than ever, trapped by the invisible bars of her family's deceit. Each cheerful sound from inside twisted into a mocking reminder of everything she had lost. Her education, her future, her Qinghui's hand instinctively went to her abdomen, the phantom ache a constant companion. A deep breath did little to quell the rising tide of bitterness. The city lights blurred, the vibrant colors distorted by the unshed tears stinging her eyes. A car pulled up, its headlights momentarily blinding. Lin Yenshu stepped out, his silhouette outlined against the glow. He approached her hesitantly, his face etched with a concern that felt performative. Qinghui's heart clenched, a familiar pang of disappointment radiating through her. Even now, even after everything, a part of her foolishly yearned for genuine warmth, for an acknowledgement of the gaping wound their family had inflicted. Qinghui, Yenshu began, his voice laced with a gentle concern that grated on her raw nerves. You shouldn't be out here alone. It's cold. He offered her his jacket, a gesture that felt both familiar and alien. She stared at the offered garment, the soft wool a stark contrast to the rough prison blankets that had been her companions for so long. Do you even know why I'm out here? Her voice was barely a whisper, roughened by disuse and suppressed emotion. He flinched, his gaze dropping to the ground. I know things haven't been easy for you. Easy. The word echoed in her mind, a hollow mockery of her reality. For years. For years I spent rotting in a cell for a crime I didn't commit. Was that easy, Yenshu? The bitterness seeped into her words, staining them with the poison of betrayal. He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm before retracting. Qinghui, I know what happened wasn't right. His voice was strained, the carefully constructed mask of composure beginning to crack. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, a sound devoid of any humor. Not right? Is that all you can say? After all this time, after all the letters I wrote, all the pleas I made, not right? Each word was a shard of glass, aimed at the fragile remains of their sibling bond. He finally met her gaze, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of guilt and something else she couldn't quite decipher. If you are really wronged, he began, his voice low and earnest, I will give you justice for these 4 years. Justice. The word hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Could he truly offer her that? Could he undo the damage, erase the scars, give her back the years she'd lost? A surge of skepticism washed over her, chilling her to the bone. He continued, his voice softening, Qinghui, you're still my fiancé. The word struck her like a physical blow, the reminder of yet another life stolen, another promise broken. The engagement, a relic of a past that no longer existed, felt like a cruel joke. She looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time since her release, and saw not the brother she once knew, but a stranger shrouded in secrets and shadowed by guilt. Fiancé. She repeated the word, tasting the bitterness on her tongue. You think a simple word can erase everything? Can it bring back the child I lost? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. Her hand went to her abdomen again, the phantom pain a stark reminder of the life that had been extinguished within those cold prison walls. Yenshu's face paled, his eyes widening in shock. Child, he whispered, his voice barely audible. You were pregnant? The question, so full of naive disbelief, ignited a fire within her. Yes, she hissed, her voice laced with venom. I was pregnant. Our child. And thanks to you, thanks to all of you, I lost it. Alone. In that hellhole. The carefully constructed facade finally crumbled, revealing the fear and guilt that had been simmering beneath the surface. I didn't know, he stammered, his voice trembling. Didn't know. Qinghui's laugh was harsh, devoid of any mirth. Or did you just choose not to know? Just like you chose not to believe me, just like you chose to let me rot in there while Wanwan lived my life? His silence was a damning confession. The air crackled with unspoken truths, the weight of them suffocating. The music from the party seemed to fade, replaced by the roaring in her ears, the pounding of her heart. The world narrowed to just the two of them, locked in a silent battle of accusations and denials. Finally, his voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. I knew. The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Knew. He knew. All this time, he knew. The realization was a crushing weight, heavier than any prison sentence. He had known, and yet he had done nothing. He had chosen silence, had chosen to protect Wanwan, had chosen to sacrifice her. The betrayal was a gaping wound, tearing through the last vestiges of her hope. You knew, she repeated, her voice hollow, devoid of emotion. The world seemed to tilt, the ground unsteady beneath her feet. The lights blurred, the sounds of the party fading into a distant hum. He reached out, his hand trembling, as if to steady her. She recoiled, as if his touch were poison. "Don't," she whispered, her voice raw with pain. "Don't touch me." The color drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen and defeated. He lowered his hand, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken words, of shattered trust, of a bond irrevocably broken. The distant sirens, growing louder, seemed to echo the turmoil within her. The world swam before her eyes, the bright lights of the party turning into swirling vortexes of color. Then, darkness. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the suffocating perfume of lilies that had permeated the Lin family home just hours earlier. Qinghui sat on the edge of the stiff hospital chair, the vinyl cold against her bare arms. The lingering chill from the prison walls seemed to have settled deep in her bones, a constant reminder of the 4 years stolen from her. The celebratory atmosphere surrounding Fu Yilan's awakening felt distant, a muffled hum behind a thick glass wall separating her from the rest of the world. Her gaze drifted to the bandages wrapped tightly around her wrists, a stark white against her sallow skin. Beneath the gauze, the scars pulsed with a dull ache, a physical echo of the countless humiliations endured. "They're happy she's awake. They should be." But the thought felt hollow, devoid of genuine emotion. The joy, the relief, it all belonged to them, to a world she no longer felt a part of. Mrs. Lin fussed over Yilan, her voice a high-pitched trill of relief and motherly concern. Qinghui watched the scene unfold, a bitter taste rising in her throat. For years I wasted in that hellhole, and she couldn't even spare me a single visit. The thought was a venomous serpent, coiling in the pit of her stomach. Yan Shu, her brother, approached her, his brow furrowed with a concern that felt performative. "Qinghui, are you all right? You look pale." His words were gentle, but his eyes held a flicker of something else, something akin to apprehension. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Fine. That's what they all say. What they expect me to say." The word tasted like ash in her mouth. He hesitated, his gaze shifting to her bandaged wrists. Those look nasty. What happened?" Qinghui looked down at her wrists, the bandages a stark reminder of the brutality she had endured. "An accident," she murmured, the word a practiced lie. "An accident orchestrated by those who were supposed to protect me." The truth was a barbed wire fence, ready to tear apart the fragile facade of normalcy they were so desperately trying to maintain. The room buzzed with nervous energy. The lawyer, a portly man with slick back hair, cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Now that Miss Fu is awake, perhaps we can finally put this unfortunate incident behind us." Qinghui's head snapped up, her eyes locking with the lawyer's. "Incident? Is that what they're calling it now?" The rage, long suppressed, began to simmer within her. "Incident," she repeated, her voice laced with ice. "For years of my life, Mr. Zhang. Is that what you call an incident?" The room fell silent. The air thickened with tension, the unspoken accusations hanging heavy in the space between them. Mrs. Lin's carefully constructed composure began to crack, her smile faltering. "Qinghui, please," she whispered, her voice strained. "Not now." But Qinghui couldn't stop. The dam of her silence had finally broken. "Why not now, mother? When is the right time to talk about the 4 years I spent rotting in prison for a crime I didn't commit?" The words tumbled out, raw and ragged, fueled by years of suppressed anguish. Suddenly, a weak voice cut through the tense silence. It was her, Yilan whispered, her eyes fluttering open, her gaze fixed on Wan Wan, who stood frozen in the doorway, her face ashen. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs. All eyes turned to Wan Wan, the unspoken accusations now finding a target. Qinghui watched her sister, her heart pounding against her ribs. She knows. She finally knows. Fu Shiye, his face contorted with rage, strode towards Wan Wan, his voice a low growl. What did you say, Yilin? Yilin, her voice gaining strength, repeated, it was her. It was Lin Wan Wan who pushed me down the stairs. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Wan Wan stumbled back, her eyes wide with fear. No. That's not true. She's lying. Fu Shiye's grip tightened on her arm. Speak up, he demanded, his voice thunderous. Lin Wan Wan pushed you? Yilin nodded weakly, her eyes filled with tears. Yes. It was her. A chilling silence descended upon the room. Qinghui watched as the carefully constructed lies crumbled around them, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The relief that washed over her was so intense it was almost painful. Finally. Finally, someone believes me. Mrs. Lin's carefully crafted facade shattered completely. She rushed to Wan Wan's side, her voice laced with panic. Wan Wan, tell them it's not true. Tell them. Wan Wan, trapped in the spotlight of truth, began to tremble. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a way out of the web of her own lies. But there was none. The truth, long suppressed, had finally been unleashed, and there was nowhere left to hide. The silence stretched, each tick of the clock amplifying her guilt. Wan Wan, Qinghui said, her voice quiet but firm, tell them the truth. The words hung in the air, a final plea for honesty, a final chance for redemption. But as Qinghui looked into her sister's eyes, she saw only fear, only desperation. And in that moment, she knew. Wan Wan would never confess. The years of lies had become her shield, her prison. And in that prison, she would remain, trapped by her own deceit. The weight of this realization settled heavily on Qinghui, a chilling reminder of the long road to healing that lay ahead. The truth was out, but the scars, both visible and invisible, would remain. The sterile white of the hospital room pressed in on Qinghui, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the graduation party. The antiseptic smell, sharp and biting, replaced the cloying sweetness of celebration. Just a few hours ago, she had stood amidst a sea of faces, all smiles and congratulations, none of them truly seeing the hollow ache behind her own forced smile. Now, she was surrounded by family, their faces etched with varying degrees of concern, guilt, and something else she couldn't quite decipher. Disappointment, perhaps? Or was it relief that the scandal was contained, swept under the rug yet again? Qinghui, Mrs. Lin's voice was laced with a tremor, a performance Qinghui had seen too many times. Are you all right? This whole situation is just so stressful. Stressful for whom, mother? Qinghui wondered, the words a bitter taste on her tongue. Stressful for the woman who orchestrated this charade, or stressful for the daughter who paid the price? She swallowed the retort, the familiar lump of resentment forming in her throat. It was pointless. They would never understand, never truly see the scars they had carved into her soul. I'm fine, Qinghui replied, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. For years of forced composure had built a wall around her heart, a fortress against the relentless onslaught of their carefully constructed reality. Yan Shu, her brother, stepped forward, his brow furrowed in what Qinghui assumed was supposed to be concern. Qinghui, why didn't you tell us sooner? About Lu Chen. He avoided her gaze, his fingers fidgeting with the button of his jacket. His guilt was a palpable thing, hanging heavy in the air. He knew. He had always known. The realization was a cold fist clenching around her heart. Tell you? Qinghui's laugh was brittle. Would you have believed me? Would any of you have believed me over your precious Lu Chen, your golden boy? The words were sharp, barbed, meant to pierce the veil of their carefully constructed lies. Across the room, Fu Shiye, the brother of the girl she had supposedly harmed, shifted uneasily. His initial fury had cooled, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He had been so sure of her guilt, so consumed by his desire for retribution. But now, looking at the fragility etched onto Qinghui's face, at the unwavering steel in her eyes, he began to question the narrative he had clung to for so long. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, until it was shattered by a choked sob. Lin Wanwan, the picture of innocence, her face stained with tears, rushed to Mrs. Lin's side, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "It's all my fault," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Tu should have told the truth." Qinghui's breath hitched. The confession, so carefully staged, so perfectly timed, sent a wave of nausea through her. This was it. The final act of her meticulously crafted betrayal. "Wanwan, what are you saying?" Mrs. Lin's voice was sharp, laced with panic. "It was me," Wanwan cried, her voice rising in a crescendo of manufactured guilt. "I pushed Yilin. I was jealous of Qinghui. I wanted her life." The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and whispers. Qinghui watched them, her heart a cold, dead weight in her chest. Their shock was feigned, their concern a carefully crafted facade. They had known all along. They had chosen to sacrifice her, to protect their golden child. No, Mrs. Lin's denial was weak, unconvincing. "It's not true. Wanwan, you're confused. You're just upset." "No, mother," Wanwan insisted, pulling away, her eyes wide and filled with a carefully rehearsed remorse. "It's the truth. Qinghui tried to protect me. She took the blame for me." Qinghui's gaze locked with her mother's. In that moment, the carefully constructed mask of maternal concern crumbled, revealing the cold, calculating woman beneath. The woman who had chosen to protect one daughter at the expense of another. The woman who had condemned her own child to a living hell. "I have no blood relationship with you," Qinghui stated, her voice low, devoid of any emotion. "Don't misidentify." Each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of their fractured family. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by Wanwan's choked sobs. The lawyer arrived, his face grim. He confirmed Wanwan's confession, the details laid bare, the truth finally exposed. But the revelation, instead of bringing relief, brought only a deeper sense of despair. Justice, it seemed, was a hollow victory. "It was Lin Wanwan who pushed Yilin down the stairs," Qinghui repeated, her voice echoing in the sterile room. "Why are you making excuses? Why did you let me rot in there for 4 years?" The words were a raw, open wound, a testament to the years of suffering and betrayal. Mrs. Lin reached out, her hand trembling. "Qinghui, please," Qinghui flinched away, as if her mother's touch were poison. "Don't," she said, her voice cracking. "Don't touch me." She turned to Yan Shu, her eyes searching his. He looked away, shame and guilt warring in his expression. The brother she had once adored, the one she had believed would always protect her, had failed her in the most profound way. With a final, lingering look at the family she no longer recognized, Qinghui turned and walked away. The sterile white of the hospital corridor stretched before her, a path leading away from the suffocating web of lies and betrayal. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to salvage. "I'm not coming back," she whispered, the words carried away by the sterile air. "My sister wouldn't have suffered so much if you hadn't made me disappear." The thought of the vibrant life stolen from Yilin, a life she could have shared, was a fresh wave of grief washing over her, adding to the already unbearable weight of her own suffering. This time, the tears finally came, hot and bitter, a testament to the life she had lost and the family she had mourned. This time, they were for herself. The antiseptic scent of the hospital clung to the air, a sterile contrast to the storm brewing within Lin Qinghui. Her knuckles were white against the crisp hospital sheets, the thin fabric a stark reminder of her fragility. For years stolen, locked away, her body weakened, her spirit eroded by the relentless gnawing of injustice. And now, here she was, tethered to this sterile bed, while the world outside continued its indifferent spin. The low murmur of voices filtered through the partially open door her family. Their words were indistinct, yet the tension radiating from beyond that threshold was palpable. A bitter smile touched her lips. Were they finally ready to confront the truth? Or were they simply rehearsing another act in this elaborate play of denial? A shadow fell across the doorway. Lin Yanshu, her brother, stepped into the room, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and apprehension she'd learned to recognize over the past few agonizing weeks since her release. He held a phone in his hand, the screen illuminating his pale features. "Qinghui," he began, his voice hoarse. "They're here. The police and Lu Chen." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lu Chen. The man who had framed her, who had benefited from her imprisonment. Why was he here? A cold dread seeped into her bones, chilling her more effectively than the sterile air of the hospital. Yanshu avoided her gaze, his fingers fidgeting with the phone. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden, the weight of which was about to crush him. "Qinghui.I." He started, then stopped, swallowing hard. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Qinghui held her breath, waiting for the inevitable confession, the truth she had known in her heart all along. The door swung open again, revealing her mother, Mrs. Lin, her face a mask of strained composure. Behind her stood Fu Shiye, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with an intensity that both frightened and strangely comforted her. He moved towards her bed, his presence radiating a protective warmth that she hadn't realized she craved. He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle, a silent reassurance in the chaotic storm of emotions swirling around them. Then, Lin Wanwan entered, flanked by two police officers. Her younger sister, the darling of the family, the one who had stolen her life. Wanwan's eyes, usually sparkling with feigned innocence, were wide with fear, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of impending exposure. The sight of her sister in handcuffs, the realization that justice was finally within reach, sent a surge of conflicting emotions through Qinghui. Triumph mingled with a profound sense of loss. A lawyer stepped forward, his voice clear and authoritative, cutting through the tense silence. "Lin Wanwan, you are under arrest for the intentional murder of," he paused, the name hanging heavy in the air, "and for the subsequent framing of your sister, Lin Qinghui. You have the right to remain silent." The words echoed in the sterile room, each syllable a hammer blow against the wall of deception that had protected Wanwan for so long. Qinghui watched her sister's face, searching for a flicker of remorse, a hint of regret. But there was only fear, raw and unadulterated. In that moment, Qinghui understood. Wanwan wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she got caught. A wave of weariness washed over her. The fight had taken so much out of her. She closed her eyes, the sterile scent of the hospital momentarily overwhelmed by the phantom scent of prison, the metallic tang of fear, the stale air of confinement. Outside the room, the murmur of voices escalated into a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Mrs. Lin's wails echoed through the hallway, a lament not for the victim, but for her fallen daughter, the golden child whose wings had been clipped. Yanshu stood frozen, his face ashen, the weight of his complicity finally crushing him. He had known, hadn't he? Qinghui realized with a chilling certainty. He had known and had chosen to remain silent. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Fu Shiye squeezed her hand, his touch grounding her in the midst of the chaos. It's over, Qing Hui, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. It's finally over. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. In his eyes, she saw not pity, but understanding, a shared experience of pain and a quiet strength that resonated with her own. Later, after the initial storm had subsided, after Wanwan had been led away, after her mother's wails had faded into choked sobs, Fu Shiye sat beside her bed, holding her hand. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, painting the sterile walls with hues of orange and gold. Lin Wanwan has been sentenced to life imprisonment, he said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of the verdict. Lu Chen, her accomplice, received a similar sentence. Justice, so long denied, had finally been served. Fu Shiye, she began, her voice barely a whisper, thank you for always being by my side. The words felt inadequate, insufficient to express the depth of her gratitude. He had believed in her when no one else did. He had fought for her, defended her, and ultimately, helped her reclaim her life. He turned to her, his gaze intense. Qin Hui, he said, his voice laced with a tenderness that made her heart ache, you will always be the brightest light in my life. He brought her hand to his lips, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her weary body. In that moment, surrounded by the sterile silence of the hospital room, Lin Qinghui felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember of warmth in the desolate landscape of her heart. The fight was far from over. The scars, both physical and emotional, would likely remain. But with Fu Shiye by her side, with the truth finally revealed, she knew she wasn't alone. And that, she realized, was all that mattered. The future stretched before her, uncertain and daunting, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of anticipation, a fragile hope for healing and a chance to reclaim the life that had been so cruelly stolen from her.